So, good morning and welcome back to the European Ideas Forum 2025. It's a great pleasure to again moderate different topics. Yesterday we had to span a wide horizon of topics from AI to international politics to Ukraine, and we are continuing today with another central piece of European policy. That's the whole issue of transformation, the future of climate policy, but it is neatly linked, of course, with competitiveness, the European role as a global actor as well. So I'm extremely delighted to have wonderful speakers with us, and one will join us indeed online from Portugal, but I'm very happy to have both of you here. Dolores, as the Secretary General of the EPP, very busy times. Just mentioned you came from the Parliament, so the last 2 weeks are extremely busy with a lot of issues. And Mettler, I think you are also very well known here in Brussels in different capacities, from the Commission to very strong voice in terms of the transformation from an economic private sector perspective, and Secretary General of the Ministry of Economics in Lisbon, Mr. Barroco. He will join us later on. Hopefully we will have him online. Well, you know, these days and just recently, for example, we finally agreed that we stick with our climate goals of 2040. It was a heavy debate, and I think the debate is definitely not over, but these are one of the issues we are going to debate later on. I would like to discuss with you over the next roughly 50 to 55 minutes. First, the gap between the ambitions, and I think European Union is still maintaining very high ambitions if I compare it to other big nations. And then what are we going to deliver? Are we able to do that or not? And the second is indeed an issue on balancing the ambitious climate goals, the competitiveness, and issues such as social fairness and our global standing. I'm very delighted, Secretary of State, Mr. Barroco, to have you here on the screen. I hope you can hear us. Good morning to Lisbon.
Hi, good morning.
Perfect.
I can hear you just fine.
That is already an important issue. So let's start a bit on this issue of ambitions and what we are going to do delivery. I think the economic and political environment has dramatically changed when we started in the first von der Leyen period on this green goal, and this was a different world, definitely, and we had high gains. We had been aware, of course, that the transformation is important. But now we have seen a lot of issues. We have to reshift budgets because defending, we talked about Ukraine yesterday, strains very much on our national and European budgets. The other thing is it's an ongoing criticism on the regulatory burden. We have a lot of omnibuses running around in Brussels. Let's see whether they will really move the shop ahead. And there's a growing skepticism, of course, among people, whether we will manage it, whether it is socially fair. And these are topics we are going to discuss. Mrs. Mettler, when we met first, you, in your former capacities, you put very much an emphasis on innovation, less regulatory approaches, let the market forces run and bring innovation. So let's start with this topic. Where are we standing? Is the regulatory burden slowly weakening? Have we more space, more air to breathe as entrepreneurs, for example?
Excellent question, and thank you for inviting me to contribute to this. So the first thing to say about ambition is ambition means nothing without delivery. So ambition on paper is useless, if I can say that. And I think that the last 5 years have been very sobering because at the beginning of the first von der Leyen Commission, there really was a lot of momentum and political consensus that we wanted to be leaders. But what we have to say today is a lot of the decarbonization we have seen in Europe has come through deindustrialization. And this no one signed up for. And I found it very disheartening that only at the end of the von der Leyen I Commission did we really understand that there was basically no business case for the Green Deal, which, remember, was sold to us as the new growth agenda. So this is a very sobering point. If you compare us to the United States and China, I need to say that also from a global perspective, I think the perception is that China is beating us hands down on decarbonization and on leadership in clean technologies, which then brings me to the point that you raised around innovation. Because the point I want to make to you today is the issue remains valid, but it cannot only be viewed through a climate perspective. Why? Because clean energy is today very much about security and resilience. 60% of our energy today is imported in the form of fossil fuels, 60%. Europe is a resource-poor geography. We don't have oil and gas. By the way, that number is higher than it was 2 decades ago. We import more fossil fuels today, proportionally speaking, than we did 2 decades ago. So despite all the climate this and that and target, we continue to be very reliant on fossil energy. And that's sobering and that's dangerous. Let me say it's dangerous. On clean technologies, we are highly dependent, and in some segments, really virtually fully dependent on China. So these dependencies in energy are dangerous. They're really dangerous. And the only way for us to go forward is to embrace clean energy, but we need to do it in a much smarter way, much smarter way. I can speak a little bit about this if you would like me to. Because basically what we have done is in our approach to climate and clean energy, it's been all about regulation and targets. What I want to advocate for here is really simplification. Because I've spent the last 6 years trying to get clean tech startups off the ground in Europe. I can tell you we have amazing entrepreneurs, we have amazing technologies. That's not the issue. The issue is nothing scales. And here, my message to you is we are not only over-regulated, we are over-governed. The problem that these companies faced were not just regulations, but energy is very regional. So they start off at a regional level where you need to get permits, which is a notorious difficulty in Europe. But then you deal with the national level, right, for all sorts of regulations. And then usually in clean energy, you're dealing with a subsidy. So that then brings you to Brussels and DG Competition, DG ENA, et cetera. For a small company, this is a degree of complexity that they simply cannot manage, And then on top of everything, you're facing a very fragmented market. You face very high costs. So the point is, we have basically what we need in Europe, but nothing scaled. So this is something to do for the policymakers here in Brussels and the member states. So simplification is important. If I can give an example, everyone's talking about grids and the grid package is coming. I've looked at the tendering process for grids. They are 23,000 pages per tender. So when a transmission system operator puts out a tender, it comes with 23,000 pages. Can you imagine that? No. So what I want to see from Brussels is, can't we have functional tenders? Can't we say we expect the technology to do this and then maybe take it down to just 1,000 or 2,000 pages, which would still be a lot. But this is what I want to see from Brussels. It's not just all this sort of top-down regulation, but really where can we simplify? Which brings me to my second point. Brussels used to be really good at standardization, right? If you think about the GSM standard, if we want to scale quickly, it is crazy that everything is such a bespoke tendering process, a bespoke product. We're talking about energy. So energy is not like an iPhone. You don't need really a really sophisticated user interface. We can just say, these are the specs, and now, this is the standard, and then we go out and we deploy. We don't do that, right? Everything is really sort of customized at a national level. So this needs to change. My last point is there is a trend in energy, which is, I call it modularity, where you basically, you can think of it a little bit like Legos, where you can put things together. I mean, this would be a European strength. If we had the standardization, if we say we had this modularity, we can build systems together between hardware and software. Why is no one thinking about this here? this is the way to go at it. I always say innovation takes place at the intersection of different disciplines. But because the public sector cannot organize itself, and here we have energy, and here we have digital, and here we have industrial policy, we get these really sort of fragmented policies that really don't add up to innovation. So there's huge scope for improvement.
Well, a lot of topics we discussed yesterday with AI. I see a lot of similarities in between. But Dolores, being the Secretary General of the largest political party, the European People's Party, we are the strongest political force, and that comes with a lot of responsibility as well. And we have gone through a lot of debates internally. Our family is quite big. But describing from your position and also from a political party's perspective, how would you describe the approach the party has now chosen in terms of innovation, competitiveness, and subsidiarity? And later on, we're going to our colleague in Portugal to see a bit more on the national level, because Natalie, you correctly pointed out that we have the European level here, but there's a lot of things on the other levels. But Dolores, back to the party stuff.
Thank you so much. First of all, Europe, it's in the middle of a crossroad with three main issues. First, security and defense. This is clear. The second one, competitiveness, the one that she was explaining to us, and the third about climate. But let me put the focus in the competitiveness. What we need to be competitiveness, and this is the point of view of European People's Party. The first, energy, of course. We don't have to depend on third countries. We have to be sovereignty with the energy, but we have to reduce the price of this energy. And I can put now 2 points on the table. Nuclear. Yes, EPP was the one that put the nuclear energy as a green and climate energy for transition. And second thing, for example, I'm from, and because the minister is from Portugal and me, we are from the Peninsula Iberica, and the Peninsula Iberica is not connected with the rest of Europe. And what we did to connect Peninsula Iberica with the rest of Europe to do a union market of energy. So the first, it's energy. The second one is red tape. We have to cut all the burdens, all the red tape. And this means one new directive means 2 out. And we have to put on a screen in the European Parliament and in the Commission and in the Council that every time that we are taking 2 out, to put in the screen 2 less, and perhaps, open a bottle of cava every time that we are putting 2 out. And then we have to implement very well this less bureaucracy, because if not, the people, they don't feel that we are reducing the bureaucracy. And EPP, what did, we achieved the first omnibus law that we are going to apply 1st of January for all the industry, SMEs, entrepreneurs, and this means that they will see that we are reducing bureaucracy. But it is true that I want to listen to our minister because, of course, that each state members, they can believe on that, and they have to implement, they have to help, because if Europe is doing, but then we are not implementing in each state member, it doesn't make sense. And I can say, on EPP that I'm proud because the last term we had just 5 prime ministers. Now we can say that we have 12, 13 prime ministers, because in some we are in a coalition, but we have 13 governments under EPP, and I can assure you that in all these governments that belongs to EPP, they are implementing all this less bureaucracy. The third point, very important, to escalate, you were explaining very well, it is we need the union markets. Why? We need we need that the SMEs, entrepreneurs, industry, we need the union capital. We need them the possibility to get capitals in Europe, because now we are seeing how our industry or startups, young startups, that they want to scale up, and they don't have possibility to get capital in Europe, and they have to move to the United States or to another country. So come on, we have to achieve the union capitals. Fourth, for me, very important, SMEs. We have to look SMEs as SMEs. We cannot include SMEs inside of the package of the big industry. So when we are cutting red tape, we have to put the focus, of course, in the big industry, but then we have to implement for them specific measures for them to implement this less bureaucracy. Because, you cannot say to SMEs with 5 employees to read 23,000 pages? Come on. And do we have to tell them, okay, let's contract 2 more people in SMEs just to get funds from European Union? No, because there is a lot of bureaucracy. So SMEs has to be a special point of view and regulation for them. And then climate. The 5th point, it is true that Europe wants to lead all about, the fight against the climate change, but I have to say that, and I'm proud of that because it was a commissioner, EPP commissioner, and from Spain, Arias Cañete, who got the agreement in Paris, and what we decide in Paris, 2050, 2050. This is obliged. But to arrive to 2050, what happened in this period of time? Because we put 2 objectives, 2050 0, in 2030 55%, but now the left parties that the last term they were very key parties in the European Parliament and in the Commission, because EPP, we didn't have so much prime ministers and so much commissioners, so they were a key party and they asked all the society, all the economy to accelerate this process and to do it without the industry. So this is what now where we are, that we put a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of burdens, a lot of requirements that they are not arriving, and for them it's a lot of cost. If we already decide in Paris 2030, 55%, 2050, 100%, why we have to put in 2040, 90%? Why? Because this is to accelerate the process, to accelerate without them. So we have to do everything with them, with flexibility, being realistic, and helping them. If we are putting burdens against them, we are not going to get there. So this is my first point.
We have the industry, in particular the small and medium sizes. We talk later a bit on the international cooperation because, Europe is not longer the center of these, and developments have to take place elsewhere. But Minister Barroca, I'm glad to have you here and again from the Iberian Peninsula, and we had all this pleasant experience during our last party congress in Valencia when we had been blacked out, and one of the reasons was indeed not being connected to the rest of the... But, and Madeleine mentioned that we have already 20,000 pages of regulations, and I assume there might be some national and local regulations on top. So could you please describe a bit the situation in your country? What is your approach to indeed enhance, and a lot of companies in Portugal, for example, a small and medium-sized enterprise, I think this plays perfectly into that what Dolores said. So what are the current situations?
Thank you, and thanks a lot for inviting me. First, one of the aspects we've got is, I would say, from a dogmatic approach, we have now moved to a pragmatic approach. We used to think about climate change and investment in climate change as an end in itself. Nowadays, we're talking as Europe, first about security of supply and sovereignty, then as a second point, the enhancement of competitiveness for our companies and accessibility of prices of energies for our families. And then as a result of those two, investment in clean technologies will be the way. Taking that into account, 3 aspects I believe are of essence here. The first one is that we are at risk these days in Europe to be the biggest bloc that believes in climate change, but because of the regulations we have in place, even from an environmental permitting perspective, we are the ones that are the slowest to invest. So it would be ridiculous to think that the US is moving faster than Europe because they've got easier regulations, even though they do not believe in climate change and are actually against climate change technologies or renewable energy technologies these days. But that might be one of the risks we've got these days. Second perspective, it has to do with, I would say, a complementarity between investment in electrons and molecules and then investments in bits. And what I mean with this is we all think about renewable energies and renewable gases. Hydrogen was a hype just until now. But what we need to also be aware is that there is enormous space for innovation in Europe through the usage of digital technologies applied to the power grids and applied to electricity generation. So in that sense, what I believe we've got is we're at the crossroads where there's a lot of energy demand for AI, but we also need to think about the benefits of AI for energy management. And therefore, that's also one of the aspects we need to put at the core of our policy, which is to complement energy policies with digital policies. And of course, the simplification aspect of having the environmental permitting as one of the enabling factors as well. What we see from Portugal, and that's one of the aspects we believe needs coordination at European level, is the need of moving from having an energy union from a regulatory perspective to having now a single energy market at the European level. So what we see is that, for instance, energy prices in Iberia and in Portugal are amongst the most competitive of Europe. But then if you look at the final energy price that industries pay, it is still not the case. And the reason for that is that the EU has still not managed to ensure that there is a level playing field for the state aid benefits, and therefore there are industries in other countries with gray energies having more competitive prices through state subsidies, and that's bad for the energy and for the internal market competitiveness. So this complementarity between energy and competitiveness then also comes at play, and it can jeopardize the social acceptance of energy policies, because if you've got clean energy, but then your energy prices are not the lowest because of an external factor, the people and the communities will also not accept those projects very easily. And so that's why moving from a single energy market in regulation to a true energy market at EU level becomes of essence these days as well. And the last aspect has to do with this perspective of ambition and regulation. Ambition without implementation actually paves the way for a social backlash. People will be fed up of talking about climate change if they do not see the benefits of it. We are in a moment where strong investment can bring tangible results for the quality of life of our people. So it's a moment of mobilization and investment and clarification of the rules. That's why I fully support the vision of simplification as one of the key aspects then that we also need to move forward. Last remark, and when it comes to tender complexity and regulations, it's actually a meet in the middle approach. I would say managing an energy system is more complex than it ever was. We have decentralized power generation, we have multiple generators, we've got auto self-consumption. So it's much more complex than it ever was. So I would say we will need clearer rules. There, of course, is also the need to having local regulations, but the local regulations need to be shared across Europe. One of the aspects we've done, for instance, was to share with our Spanish colleagues because of the Spanish blackout on April 28th that affected Portugal. We ended up also sharing with them our energy regulations so that they could apply same rules to avoid having similar problems in the future. We are so heavily interconnected that we for sure need to have the same rules applied to the market so that we can also feel trust to be connected to Spain. And of course, we also are eager to be more tightly connected to the rest of Europe.
So then growing from the bottom to a certain extent. Before we go into this international dimension, I would like to focus a bit on communication, because Dolores, in our business and politics, but and in your business as well, getting the message out to the people is absolutely crucial. And we have thrown a lot of acronyms over the last years, from ETS to CBAM. I doubt that even many here in Brussels will understand that, and this adds, unfortunately, to the complexity and the difficulties to sell this issue. Dolores, as a political manager, if I may say, as a member of the parliament, how do you sell this vision you had? Because it's easily slipping into a very technocratic language for small circles of the enlightened, if I may say so, but this is not the point. We have to bring the people in, and a lot of this unrest, rise of populism definitely is related that people are confronted with a reality, a fastly shifting reality, they do not understand. They see the consequences, and Minister, you alluded to this issue, what is at the very last mile, but how can we better package it into a narrative which is really forward-looking and not limiting to, you cannot do that, you're not allowed to do this. This is not the message we have to get out, I think, to the citizens.
Well, I like this question because just 1 year ago I was in a debate as today in the European Parliament to help, to change the language. Because when you are arriving just as a MEP in the European Parliament, for example, they are saying to you, well, in 1 year, perhaps you are going to start to understand, all the acronyms. Because I was president of the Petty Committee, Libe. All the words are just for the bureaucrats and the functionaries that they are living and working inside of the institutions. And I'm so sorry for them. I know that they are doing a very incredible work and job, and we need them. But if we want to approach the European society into the European institutions, we have to talk and communicate as we are talking with our families, with our son, with our parents. And always I'm saying, when I'm doing an intervention, my grandmother, now it's not anymore with us, but my grandmother has to understand me. And my son of 14 years old, he has to understand me. If we are starting to talk about Petty, CBAM, ETS, that first you have to study what it is ETS, this means that we're not communicating well. And then happens what happens, that the extremes, the populism, they are using not the true lies and easy solutions in a complex times that needs complex solutions to engage with the society and to engage with the young people. And come on, it is easy to communicate with the people because first, before being a bureaucrats, first to be politicians, we are citizens. And I want to be, I want to understand whatever the people is explaining to me, so I have to do exactly the same. So first, we have to talk as we are talking with our families, explaining very well what it is. For example, yesterday, EPP, we celebrate a political assembly. What it is, the political assembly? Do we think that everybody in the European society understands what it is, the political assembly? We have to explain first what it is, the political assembly, and then what we decide in the political assembly for the European citizens. So I think, I'm a politician that I'm coming from the bottom. I was a lawyer, and then, to convince a judge to win, your requirement, you have to explain very clear to the judge. So then, when I became politician from the bottom, 12 years in the municipality, really close to all the citizens, with the real problems, that perhaps the real problem is just a parking in front of his house or her house. So then you understand how we have to communicate as a citizens. And then we have to be where the society it is. And the society it is too in the social media. So we have to be in the social medias. We have to talk clear, with clear solutions. And we have to be able to explain a solution in 40 seconds. Mm-hmm. And we can do it. So I'm a believer of good communication. I'm trying every day. And EPP is trying to, to communicate clearly, easy way our solutions for the citizens. Mm-hmm.
And I remember in your old office facing the Commission, where you have worked for quite a time, then moved to another world, and a large part of your activities was indeed communicating, getting different messages out.
Well, I think if I look at the European approach, there is no amount of communication that could help overcome some of the real challenges that we are facing. And basically, our approach to energy in an effort to save the climate was to make energy expensive and scarce. And this at a time when the rest of the world is trying to make energy abundant and cheap. And I think European citizens rightly are asking, is this the right approach? Climate change has always been a collective action problem. Europe a few years ago accounted for 8% of global CO2 emissions. That's already down to 6%. Deindustrialization is helping with decarbonization, right? The point is, this is not working. It's not solving climate change. It is leading, in my opinion, it's one of the drivers of right-wing populism, is how we have treated energy by making it expensive and scarce. The other mistake that we made is we focused a lot on deployment and not on industrialization. So yes, we have been really doing a great job of rolling out Chinese solar panels, but that's not really benefiting or the society at large or leading to industrialization. With the result that we are now totally out of the game when it comes to solar industry. Remember, this is an industry that was built up in Europe. 2023, we almost lost our wind industry. It was only a last-minute intervention by the European Commission that saved it. Batteries, we are nowhere. We are nowhere. Electromobility, we're behind on all the storage solutions, critical mineral processing. Don't even get me started. The point is, this has not been good policy making. It totally neglected emerging clean technologies. It totally neglected that we needed to use basically technology to help us decarbonize and reindustrialize. So it wasn't really a good approach. In general, I have to say, and this is what I would encourage now, is maybe fewer sticks and more carrots. I think that if I look at what happened in Germany with the heat pumps, there was a complete backlash, right? So give incentives rather than telling people, you can't do that. Give them an incentive to buy a heat pump. Give them an incentive to buy an electric vehicle. But don't tell them top down what they should or shouldn't do. I mean, we're dealing with mature adults, so give the right incentives, but don't be so prescriptive. This is the biggest transition that any of us will ever live through. I remembered when I worked at the European Commission and we talked about all of this, people were like, there's going to be millions of jobs and net zero, it's going to be paradise. And my own background is in structural reform. And I said, I don't think it's going to be like this. I really think you're doing a disservice telling people that this is the road to paradise, when we know this is going to be hard. Talk about it as if it was a structural reform, because then people know it's going to be hard. They are prepared. We didn't do that. We did a really poor job of preparing people for what is to come. And let me go back to what I said earlier. We are a resource-poor geography. We don't have oil and gas. And this, in a world that is as disrupted and as hostile as it is today, is a major vulnerability. So yes, we have to get to clean energy. There is no alternative, not just for climate, but for resilience, for security. But we got to do it in a way where it helps our industry, where we reindustrialize, and where we really look at the security aspects. Energy is critical infrastructure. It is full of components that are not made in Europe. You know that today we were supposed to get made in Europe. We're not getting it. It's a big mistake. Our infrastructure in Europe is infiltrated with components that can be used for surveillance, that can be manipulated, or that can be withheld if someone wants to impose export controls. This is not safe. Why is no one thinking more strategically about the energy system than just from a climate perspective? Why is this not happening? This energy is the next battlefield, and let me tell you, we are not well prepared.
Well, we hope at the Martin Center at least to put these nexus together, and also the next session is dealing about with these topics. But I would like to be back to the international dimension, which you alluded already, because what is our little share and what is our contributions? Are we really investing the money correctly here? And Minister Berroco, tomorrow I'm flying to Rabat, to Morocco. This is your neighboring countries, not only in terms of football, which soon becomes a very important issue, but also in terms of energy, because they are, and for Spain, Dolores, it's the same issue. There are big plans to connect Northern Africa, the west coast of Africa, with Europe, hoping some kind of security contributions. But are we really playing the card very well? Are we not making to a certain extent, the same mistakes we do domestically in our international relations. We talk about climate diplomacy, which is an important factor these days. But to all of you, what do you see the approaches be it through the party-to-party relations? We have a global network of parties, for example. Industrial innovation is now globally still, despite the resilience and the security issues. And in your case, Minister, being a neighbor to that, what are the potential corporations looking beyond the scope of the European Union? So, Dolores, would you like to start?
Okay. First of all, EPP is a member of two international parties in a global, global international parties, because we have to explain well for the people what it is. So there are two platforms where all the central right parties, we are members of these two big parties in the world. One is CDI, that it is more a platform with parties from South America, from Africa, from Asia, and the IDU, that I was last week in the IDU in Washington, that it is more Canada, Australia, New Zealand, all Europe, United States, of course. And these platforms, what helps us? First, to share good experience from all the governments around the world, not just looking internally European Union. So this makes us easy to understand, for example, what it is doing all continent Europe, what is doing all continent America, all continent Asia. Why? Because we have parties, central right parties from all these countries, so they are helping, or we are helping each other to understand a good experience that they are putting on. For example, last week, I have to say, and I was very thankful for that, the platform, the IDU, gave us the opportunity to have some bilaterals, and we had some bilaterals with senators, Republican senators, and with the Department of State in the United States. And I have to say that all of them, they congratulate us for the Omnibus Law. And I was so happy because, and it is true that after that, we saw and we read the United States strategy, but we have to say that they say congratulations, because the Omnibus Law reduce bureaucracies, reduce red tape, burdens, reduce cost. The most important it is that it's reducing cost. So we know how to do it in Europe. And of course, that if you are getting all this experience around the world, we can lead better. And then, talking about the world, another point very important for the climate change too, it is the new agreements. Now, next week in the plenary in Strasbourg, we are going to vote in favor of Mercosur. So we are going to talk about a market of 450 100 million of persons here in Europe, plus Mercosur, means that we are going to be a market about 800 millions of people in a market. So there it is the place that we can share not just defending democracy, that we have to, rule of law, that we have to, transparency, that we have to, good governance, that we have to. Good governance means not just transparency and fight against corruption, means to reduce red tape, good standards, fight against climate change with the industry, with flexibility, with dialogue among all of us. So Europe, now in these moments, we have a huge opportunity, and EPP, we think that we have a huge opportunity to open new markets. Next year, we hope that we are going to have the new agreement with Mexico. Now, a lot of countries around the world, or a lot of geographic spaces, with one more country, they are looking at us because Europe is reliable. It's a good partner. First, because we are a democracy, one of the best democracies in the world. We have rule of law. We are reliable. We are good governance, fight against corruption, transparency. So now a lot of people is looking at us. So this is to do new agreements with us. So now it's a good opportunity to implement what we decide to implement in this term. It is less bureaucracy, to have union energy market, then capitals, then we have to improve our internal market, because sometimes our internal market makes us huge borders, that sometimes they are saying that means about 50% of tariffs, no? If you are counting. So now we have this opportunity to do it, and EPP wants to do it. Why? Because we are leading the Commission, we are leading the Council, we are leading the Parliament with our group, and now we saw how the left parties, they defeat. Why? Because they promise a lot of things to the society, to their voters, and what they left to us, more poverty, more inequality to all the society. So we are seeing in the world that the left, it's not anymore a party reference, and now we see in this term, in European Parliament and European institutions, that us, we are the key party, the key leaders. So we are the ones that we can implement all our program. And our program, it is security and defense, clearly, competitiveness, and then, of course, fight against climate change, but with industry, with dialogue, with flexibility, and without punishment the industry.
I would like to include your answers a bit with the discussions here in our audience, because we have only 10 minutes left. So I would like to open the floor. We have microphones. I mean, I have you here, Zsuzsa and Vít. I think we start with our colleague, Garvin Walshy. Keep it, please, very short. I would like to give most of you the opportunity to integrate. Thank you.
Hi, Garvin Walsh, Research Associate here at the Martin Center. It's really a question for Ann Mettler. You were talking about the need to keep energy prices down. Also the talk about the need to reindustrialize. If we are not going to use cheap Chinese solar for decarbonizing, what are the alternatives in your view, and do those come with extra costs? And if they do, how should those costs be mitigated?
So I get several ones. Do we continue on this side, please?
I'm going to take your...
Thank you very much. Yanis Vukmanis, Turquoise, we are venture capital. 2 points, if I may, quickly. On regulation, of course, we would like faster permitting, but please let's not forget that the climate policy and climate ventures depend on the rules. We still need the rules in place. So if, for example, air quality regulation was weaker, 2 of our companies would go bust. So yes, faster. No, please don't take away the rules. Ann Mettler correctly pointed out the problem of scaling. Investors in Europe are more risk averse than they are in the US. Why is that? One reason for this is that in investing you share risk. You put yourself in a group and you all invest in those particular investments. Without capital markets union, it is actually, the network is weaker in Europe. Yeah. So there is a connection here, I think, for climate, but also for general scaling of companies to the Draghi logic, if you will.
Perfect, excellent questions. I go further on, Zsuzsa, and I think we had also your comment.
Thank you, and thank you for the great insights. I have a question to Ms. Montserrat, if I may. You talked about Europe looking at partners, and you said that Europe is seen as reliable and a good partner because it brings good governance. But does Europe deliver to these countries? Because there is always a gap, in my view, between self-perception in Europe and what we genuinely want and what we manage to do. So it's about delivery. Thank you.
Very well. There's another one by my colleague. Okay, that is already, I think, a large ray from how we get the transformation made at a cost-efficient issue, having lost a lot of our technologies here. The regulatory one was again mentioned. The risk capital, we we'll have this continuous issue, and you relate it also. And of course, then the gap between perception, delivery, and communication. I would like to start with you, Minister Barocco, on these topics, and please feel free to choose one or two of these.
Yeah, thank you. The first aspect when it comes to this international perspective is that if we look at the big blocks, we clearly see China investing full-fledged on clean energy and a total value chain. We see the US investing in cheap energy, and we see that there is still a disconnect in Europe. And the disconnect in Europe is that because we still have a lot of people internally that do not believe in sustainable growth, and they're actually looking and pointing towards degrowth. And degrowth connected to deindustrialization is one of the biggest menaces we've got in Europe. And it reaches full-fledged effect when we've got some people taking technical decisions with very little accountability, hidden behind what's called environmental permitting a lot of times, that are basically blocking new projects. And that's one of the critical aspects we've got in Europe that is affecting our capacity to actually implement and go full-fledged on a transition and deliver the cheap energy prices we all need. Second perspective is that sovereignty is different from isolation. So we need to be collaborative, we need to be connected to others, and that at this moment and in the current situation we've got, there's no other way but to use some of the Chinese commodities to have lower energy prices. But the good way of doing that is actually to still protect parts of the value chain that should be critical to us. And I'm talking mostly about control mechanisms and perspectives on some of the components of the grid that should be European and that should be protected by regulation and cybersecurity regulation most of times, that would allow us to still have a sound industry and at the same time benefiting from the low prices of those commodities that will enable us to deliver low energy prices to our people. Last remark has to do with this perspective of the uptake of people. And to me, and for us in Portugal, it's all about bringing the value of the transition to the people. It's very hard to involve communities if they don't see the benefits of having low energy prices. Mostly, if you're talking about vulnerable communities in regions that are far away from city centers or whatsoever, which are the ones that will need to have the solar panels or the wind generators and whatsoever. So the biggest risk is to leave those groups behind. And to do that, what we have been investing in Portugal is on energy social tariffs that are automatically applied to vulnerable families, targeting building renovations, working on renewable energy communities so that we lower energy costs, so that these programs become just transition programs and not only climate transition programs. And of course, we look very fondly to how to protect the competitiveness of our industry. And that again goes through low energy prices, at least in the case of Portugal. I fully support the vision of having a green industrial growth and also the perspective that the stability on regulation becomes one of the key enablers of investment. Unless we are able to keep clear rules and have them stable in the long run, no one is going to invest in mechanisms such as ETS or CBAM or businesses and business models that rely on those. So having stability and clear targets assumed by the union and having regulation that protects those markets will also be critical for us to evolve. I still believe that this transition can become a template to other regions. And once we've got a more favorable global policy landscape, we might be in a good position if we take the advantage of the innovation in these business models.
And I could imagine that you could now talk, I think, for an hour on these different issues. I would like to ask you to keep it to 2 minutes because I would like to give Dolores as well also
of course.
the opportunity.
I mean, my first comment is on cost. If cost is so important to us, and it's the overriding interest, then can I just ask why we build up a system where our companies are confronted with the highest cost of energy, the highest taxes, the highest wages, the highest non-wage labor costs, the highest compliance costs. And then we turn around and we say to them, oh, but you're too expensive. I'm sorry. This is really poor policy making. And I understand our industrial base, that they are starting to lose confidence and, frankly, patience with this. I am disappointed in our economists who have never helped us to price in security, resilience, sovereignty, loss of industrial base. Where have they been? What may have seemed cheap, such as cheap Russian natural gas or cheap stuff from China, may end up to be extraordinarily expensive. And in fact, I would argue it already is. So we need to rethink the importance of cheap and cost in our economies, or otherwise we are heading for literally like an economic suicide. This is the path we're on. And here I'm looking to the largest party in Europe to really show some leadership. If we don't do this better, if we don't have the confidence to buy our own stuff, then we cannot expect our companies to invest in Europe and to have confidence. This is the stability that they need. Let me also say, on this issue of solar panels, I expect a more sophisticated debate here. The brain of a solar panel is the inverter. You don't give away the brain of anything in these times. And I have no confidence in our ability to figure out what cybersecurity actually means. We don't have the people in the public service that know how to really fight cyber attacks from China, from Russia, from all these places. I have zero confidence, I'm sorry to say. So we need, starting immediately, a much better care of our energy system. This is a system. If we don't control it, trust me, someone else will. So if you give away key components of that system, don't be surprised if it flies in your face, because this is basically where we're heading. Let me say on the issue of permitting. After the war started, I said we need like really war-type deployment of renewables now. These are war times. I always quote Deng Xiaoping, who said in 1992, the Middle East has oil, China has critical minerals. They built a whole system around that inside. Well, let me tell you, Europe neither has oil, nor do we have a lot of the clean technology. So what is our competitive advantage? Can we please think that through? Can we please be more strategic? Which leads me to my last point. On the international front, almost all growth going forward will take place outside of Europe. We need a geo-industrial deal, not just a clean industrial deal at home, but a geo-industrial deal. We have a lot of companies in Europe that are leading in energy tech. We need to help them get into these markets, to help these markets decarbonize. This would be our biggest contribution to fighting climate change, is getting our excellent companies, and we have them, whether it's Siemens Energy, Schneider Electric, we have so many of these companies that can go into the world and help these markets decarbonize. And this is what we need. We need a geo-industrial deal so that we really help others, but we also help ourselves.
Dolores, one key message we would like to take out of this debate.
Well, I'm going to say to her the bottlenecks that we have, because you were saying, well, we need to deliver. So the first bottleneck, I have to say it's ideological from the left parties. I have to say it. I see it every day in the European Parliament. If there is a good solution, but this solution comes from EPP, the Greens, they say no. But they know that it's good, but no, it's EPP. We don't want it. So first, for me, it is not being pragmatic and being first ideological than putting solutions on the table. The second one, we were talking today, the cost of energy and the lack of a fully integrated market. The third one, the obsession. For me, it's obsession with the regulation. First, it is regulation, and then later, the tools. No, come on. No, come on. Always I'm saying that EPP is a conservative and a reformist party. Why? Because we want to conservate what it works, and the things that it's not working, let's reform. But doesn't mean reform do a lot of laws. No, just to do the ones that we need to improve and to do it better and with less time and reducing the permitting, the license permitting. So, you know, I've been a minister, I was a minister, and, you know, this mind that, well, I'm a minister, I have to do a lot of laws. No, perhaps you are going to be the best minister if you are not doing laws. The ministers good are the ones that are conservating what is working in that country, and then to improve reforms what is not working.
Well, that's
And
exactly...
I know I finished, so nothing else, thank you so much. But EPP has the ideas, and I think so that in this term, we have the possibility, because we are the key party, different than the last term, that we didn't have so much countries governing in Europe.
Well, and I hope that the Martin Center, as the think tank of the EPP, also contribute. That's the topic of these 2 days. I'm very delighted to have you all here. Minister, great to have you at least online next time, hopefully here in Brussels. I would like to thank you, all of you, for these inspiring discussions. And then, of course, I have the pleasure to hand over to my dear colleague, Alicia. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah.